5:23. Therefore, if you are presenting your offering at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and present your offering. When a road is built, people use it to travel. It is used to transport culture and ideology. That is why when a road is built, it changes the course of history. When the International Peace Highway is completed, the world can be physically bound together as one.
In the Old Testament, the book of Proverbs in particular, but other books too, are called wisdom literature. And wisdom was thought to be personified in the Old Testament by women. Does that make sense? Absolutely. Women have special wisdom. And in Greek philosophy, you know the goddess Sophia? She was the goddess of wisdom. So it wasn't just Israel that was thinking this way. So wisdom is something that I think we need as we are considering anything in life, because we need to do things wisely all the time. Whatever we're undertaking or thinking about, we have to do things wisely. So in the last book, or the last chapter of that book of Proverbs, the whole chapter is written about a woman who exemplifies in Israel what an ideal wife would be like. It's an interesting chapter to read because she's a very wise person. And she brings great blessings to her family, to her household, to the community. So mothers in particular, I would ask you to read that last chapter of Proverbs and see what it has to say. It has very interesting things in it. Now but as I mentioned, Dr. Balcom was there at that time, and he spoke to us the day before he went to Seattle. Do you remember what he said about the divisions in our church? He was talking about, the different courses that people are deciding on taking, and he mentioned that from the New Testament age, there's been actually divisions in the Christian churches, and he mentioned Paul and Peter. He gave them new nicknames, P1 and P2. Do you remember? And he mentioned a little bit about what happened with these two people. I want to go into it kind of briefly because I think it's worth looking at. Everybody here knows who Peter was, right? Peter was one of the stronger in faith of the 12 disciples. And in the scriptures, Jesus says, he's quoted somewhere saying, "Upon this rock I will build my church." Now, Paul was someone who came after Jesus died. He was called to his ministry. And his ministry was one that he wanted to bring to the Gentiles, to the people outside Israel. Peter, however, was more working along with the other disciples, the original disciples, inside Israel, in Jerusalem. So Paul developed his own gospel. His own, I mean by that, it wasn't the same as the ones in Jerusalem. The ones in Jerusalem wanted the people to join their church and then do all the things that the Jewish people did. All the laws and the commandments of Moses they were supposed to keep. So it was difficult because that's a lot of things to do. And yet they felt we've got to do these things because if we don't do these things here in Jerusalem, right in the midst of the Jewish culture, we'll get accused. And their life was already difficult because of the persecution, because they were different. So Paul, on the other hand, was evangelizing to other places, other countries and cities, and he realized as he was working that it's impossible to get people to be converts and first they have to become a Jew, and then they can kind of get to Christianity. So he just kind of jumped over everything, and he gave his disciples, his converts, freedom. Freedom, do whatever you want to do, but if you have faith in Jesus, that's what will save you, not the Old Testament law. And if you read his letters, it's full of stories where he's kind of debating with those disciples back in Jerusalem who send people out to try to convince Paul's new churches that Paul isn't really correct. And you've got to do the things that we're telling you to do. And they would bring letters from Jerusalem to these little churches that Paul was starting. See, this is signed by none other than, and it might be James, who was the leader of the church there. And so the new converts were struggling, trying to understand, what are we supposed to believe? And so these debates were running through the Old Testament, the New Testament. And in Paul's letters, he's trying to fix things. So his way of doing that is actually, he feels if he's going to bring an offering to Jerusalem of money, it will make things better for everybody. So in many of his letters, he's telling his churches, let's collect an offering. I'll be there at such and such a time, and I'll gather the money from you. And once he gets it all complete, he takes it in quite a moving story where he goes to Jerusalem with the offering. And his hope is that it will build peace with the community there in Jerusalem. How successful he was, I don't know if history even knows, because it was a deep problem. The Jewish people just couldn't understand how a religion could start in their country and call itself Jewish, but not want to follow all the laws of Judaism. So it was very difficult, and basically the church really took off outside of Israel, not inside. So Paul was trying to build peace, and his offering was his attempt to do it. Peace is often built when we do something that people can recognize is good and helpful. And it bridges the misunderstandings, these conditions that we could look at as the building a bridge to overcome a difficulty or a misunderstanding. I told you last week, if you were here, I told you I was having difficulty with, not difficulty, but I didn't want to face a neighbor in Seattle while I'm now living at Windermere. Because 7 years ago, I took a tree about halfway down so they could see Lake Washington from their balcony. And now when I got back to Seattle, I see the tree in 7 years grew tall. It's one of these trees that sends shoots straight up. And by now, after 7 years, they were, I don't know how many, dozens and dozens of these shoots that were 2 or 3 inches thick and 10 to 15 feet tall. They couldn't see the lake over it. So this week I went out, I got a tall ladder, and I began cutting those limbs. I took them all down. I made the tree much less than half of what it was before. I'm sure now they can see Lake Washington again. Now, I feel like when I see this neighbor, I'll want to go talk to him because I know they'll be happy. And before I knew they wouldn't be happy. So it's just an effort I'm making to build a bridge with this neighbor. And I didn't do anything wrong. Like in the scriptures we were reading about Jesus, and Jesus was saying if you're bringing something to God, an offering or a gift, and you realize there's some difficulty with someone, go and solve that problem before you make the offering. I didn't really do anything wrong, but I know in a way I'm responsible for that tree because I'm the one who knows about it, and other people up there probably don't. So I told the pastor in Seattle, I'll take care of it. He already faced some difficulty with that neighbor over something he built that was blocking the view. So I knew that neighbor was thinking about these things, and somebody needed to do something about the tree. But I guess what I'm just trying to say is we have to make efforts to solve problems. And sometimes they may not necessarily be a problem that we created, but anyway, if we know that barrier is there, doesn't it kind of mean it's some responsibility on our part to remove it? I think so. So, in our efforts to build peace in this community, amongst ourselves, with our neighbors, which I think we always ought to think about, because our church located on this corner, is seen by a lot of people in the neighborhood. When they come up, they drive by here, they slow down, they have to stop, they look at it. And it's even by a busy highway. So it's in our interest to make our neighbors feel comfortable about what we do here and how things look here. So if we meet them on the street, we can feel good about talking with them. I'm sure you feel the very same way in your own neighborhood, right? You do, yeah. And not just around your home, but your neighbor is the person also that you work with, that you go to school and sit next to. These are your neighbors too. So I think in every way we have to think about what people feel and consider their feelings and make some effort to bridge the gap that might be there. And sometimes, if you're a sensitive person, you may not even know what it is, but you feel something, right? Sometimes you feel that. And so, just in that feeling, there's some responsibility we have to make an effort to find out what it is. And I think that's what Jesus was trying to say in that story. You know, if you don't feel quite at peace with God in making some kind of offering, find out why, and then make some effort to make things right so you can come back to the altar and make the offering and know that it's an offering that God can accept. And I think there's other places in the scriptures where God says through the prophets, don't think that just by following the laws, you're going to make everything right. But there's more that has to be done, and that is to be your brother's keeper, to take care of things which you alone are someone who can do. Because if you know, then the responsibility is something that you have to live with. You know, your conscience, it tells you always. And we can deny it, and we can try to, you know, just kind of put it down. But the better way to live is as soon as that conscience tells you something, remember it and take care of it. Because if you deny it, then it takes a long time sometimes before the conscience tells you again, or reminds you. Sometimes it doesn't remind you unless some situation comes up, a certain kind of situation, and then it reminds you. We've got to really grab that thought and then act upon it while we are in remembering it and not let it go. So I'm going to close with Father's efforts to build peace in the world. And as you know, they hinge so much on the Peace Highway. Father had been thinking about it since the 1980s, of building a highway around the world that would help bring peace, because it would bring those countries which have had difficulty with one another and they haven't felt like good neighbors, it would bring them together. The Union in America, we're living, and then, Father kind of suddenly announces he thinks we ought to build an international highway, which will bring peace. I mean, it's great if you're the kind of person that thinks in terms of faith and religion, but I think a lot of people couldn't understand really what he was talking about. They wanted to build more weapons, because that's always kind of a approach that the military takes. We need a different weapon, a new weapon, a stronger weapon that the other side doesn't know about, a secret weapon. And so, Father's saying, instead of this, let's build the Peace Highway. And in our district, we are part of Alaska. The real key, I think, to that International Peace Highway was the bridge, or possibly the tunnel that would go across the Bering Strait. It would take a lot of money to build it, but Father was saying, that's already, we spend that much money on war in a year or two anyway, so, in the autobiography, he talks about what that budget might include and how quickly we spent it already in the Middle East. But that Peace Highway that we sometimes don't think so much about anymore is something that a lot of countries in the world started thinking about, had already been thinking about. And earlier this year, in 2015, in Russia, the Ministry of Finance or Economy or something like that, there was a story in March, they were recommending to Putin that highway, that train track actually going right to the Bering Sea, it should be built. They said, this is the budget we'd need. We can get it right to the Bering Sea with that much money. And this is how much the bridge would cost. And it'll cost this much money. And I think that was 60% of what it would cost that they were willing to put out there. So some countries are not taking this so lightly. They'd love to see that tunnel and bridge built. And Father says, if we build it and we become neighbors, we can really learn about one another's culture. Because you learn the customs of a country, you trade with a country when you visit. You want to establish businesses. You drive through another country and you think, well, my business back home, I do this. You might be on vacation, but you think, this is my business. It would be a great opportunity to do something here. And even on vacations, people often get these great ideas about what they want to do. Sometimes that happens. Amazing things happen when you visit another place. You don't think the same thing about that place anymore. I don't know about you, but if I had a really good car that I could sleep in, like a tiny camper of some kind, I would love to drive up to Alaska and cross a bridge to Russia. I would love to do it. I would love to visit the people in Siberia and maybe at some point, reach a crossroads and decide, where do I want to go from here? Do I want to drive to the Baltic, or do I want to drive south to Korea? Wouldn't you love to have that kind of opportunity? I could just think about how wonderful it would be if Russians could drive over here and visit us, or people from anywhere else in Asia, and use that bridge. In Father's mind, it would tie the world together like nothing else and build peace. And there's nothing better, he said, than a bridge to bring things together. So in Father's mind, he just couldn't see how we would not want to do something like that. And some governments see Father's vision. I think the Russians have been thinking about that bridge for more than a century. Before their revolution, there was a czar who was thinking about it very strongly, and then World War I started and kind of put the plans on hold. At one time they owned Alaska, so they would like to link up their country. That dream for them never died. You know, it's a long way to Siberia from Moscow, but from Alaska, it's kind of just 50 miles across that strait. So I know there's a lot of dreams that Father had. One is coming true for him in just a few weeks with the opening of the International Peace Education Center in Las Vegas. That in itself is kind of small compared to the Bering Strait bridge or tunnel, but it's a big step for our country. Yeah, so that's going to be opening later this month with a 7-day workshop and then other things. The 1,000th day memorial service for True Father's ascension will I think be at that time also. And Mother's using that as the opportunity to open it and dedicate it in Las Vegas. So one of Father's dreams is coming true soon. When will that dream of the bridge and tunnel over the Bering Strait be realized? I don't know, but I'd love to see it in my lifetime. And I'd love to see world peace happen in our lifetimes. There's nothing more that we need, nothing more important, I feel, than world peace, because the wars have been going on too long. And there shouldn't be soldiers that are drafted or brought into armies to fight, but instead, young people should be able to dedicate themselves to projects that benefit and help everyone, not just the country that they're serving, but the world. Brothers and sisters, I really want to thank you on this Mother's Day, Peace Day, Day of Wisdom Day, to remind ourselves here about world peace and how to achieve it. It has to be done through wisdom. And bringing unity to anything where there's division has to be done with wisdom. So when we're thinking about the difficulties that we face in our lives of faith right now, because there are many kinds of factions that are taking place, whether it's that kind of division or it's a division that's deep and much, much older than those, we have to use wisdom and make conditions to build peace. So this time of the year, as we're looking at the opening of the Peace Education Center in Las Vegas, I think it's a good time to be thinking about world peace. So God bless you on this Mother's Day. I hope all you mothers have a wonderful celebration, and may we all use wisdom, heavenly wisdom, motherly wisdom, as we seek to build peace, whether in our community or outside it. God bless you. Let us pray. Our beloved Heavenly Parent, we thank you this Sunday as we gather here in this place to start our new week together with you. We're starting this week, and it's going to be a week of many things happening. There'll be the preparations for the Peace Center opening, as well as here in Portland and Vancouver, it's the kickoff of our Outreach Week, which starts tomorrow on Monday. And we'll be using a place for inviting people. They don't have to be from the college campus. They can be from anywhere. They can be friends that we've known for a long time. But we want to educate them. It could be a first step for these people actually being able to study deeply about Father's vision for world peace. Maybe even going to the Peace Education Center, where peace will be in everyone's hearts and minds as they study. Whatever it might be, we pray that this coming week would be a great week, and we can celebrate with you success and offer everything to you. I pray at this time that you'll guide each and every person that's here and bless every family, and may we have